Hello everyone, and welcome to our part 2 of these Weakauras guides. So today we're tackling our very first intermediate and kinda complex Weakauras, featuring this lovely stat printer showing us our agility on real time, this awesome serpent sting multi-target tracker, as well as this very fun to make Trinket cooldown tracker showing you internal cooldowns as well. And to top all of this off, we will learn all about groups as well as getting into conditions. But before we start, make sure to give a like and subscribe for advanced Weakauras guides with custom Lua coding and much more. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright everyone, so last time we worked on a very simple Weakauras that shows us Serpent Sting on a target. And this time we're gonna make that same Weakauras but for multi-targets, because I want to see how many of these targets have this debuff. Now, one thing about this Weakauras that we're gonna do is a bit more complex and a bit more intermediate. And I'm gonna approach a lot of new concepts that we haven't learned yet. And instead of dividing this video per concept, I'm actually gonna divide it per Weakauras, because each Weakauras is gonna require a different concept. So let's start with this one, and this one is gonna straight off the bat require a group. And groups, just like you have your computer that you make folders to put files inside, we're actually gonna use a group. That's where we're gonna store Weakauras inside. And there's two types of groups. There's dynamic groups and there's just groups. Now dynamic groups are basically groups that will organize the position of Weakauras, and groups are just groups that you put the Weakauras and they're gonna stay wherever you put them. Because this one, we wanna see how long the serpent stings and that organizes itself as we put them on the target. We're gonna use a dynamic group, and you'll see, it's very visual, you'll see in a second why dynamic group is better than a group. Also because we need to grow it, and yeah, we'll see in a second. So this is going to be serpent sting group, and inside this group we're going to make a progress bar. Okay, I talked about icons and progress bars last time, so you should be very comfortable with progress bars. So just before we go into triggers and all that stuff, let's just get this bar looking kind of decent. And the way we're going to do that is on display. So on display I'm gonna go kind of fast because we know how this works by now, but we're gonna adjust the color, make it a nice green. Oops, that's actually that's 0 here. And this is gonna be serpent sting, and I actually like my bars to be 300 width by 35 height, and I do want to see an icon, so we're gonna add the icon of serpent sting. And I actually want to see the name here on the left, then on the right. So I'm going to just change the anchor of these, and we're going to change these in a second, but not yet. I'm going to change this P to N, because that's the name. Or I could have just changed the anchor, it doesn't matter. But this one is already here, so let's just change this to P. And this P I actually want it a little bit bigger, maybe like a 20. And like last time, we're going to format options and decrease the precision, because we just want to see the number. So let's go into trigger. The trigger is very simple. It's going to be an aura, just like last time, but this time it's going to be multi-target group. And it's going to be a debuff, because this is the debuff, and it's going to be serpent sting. Now, we want this to clone itself, right? Because if I just put it like this, it just shows 1. And I want to see this Weakauras clone it and multiply as much as I put serpent sting. So I am actually going to use this option here, auto clone, that's going to show all the matches. And that's done, like that's the Weakauras itself. The reason why we have a dynamic group, and if we click on the group and now go on, not on display, but on group, you'll see that the groups settings, and you can make icons for the groups. I like to keep my groups like that, but you can change how it grows. It can grow down, it can grow up, and it can grow, let's make it now to the left, for example, so you get to see how it grows. Okay, as they multiply themselves, they're gonna grow towards the direction, and you choose the direction you wanna see. I'm gonna keep down because I like it, and you can space it. I'm actually gonna keep it together, and there's all sorts of stuff. You can mess with scales and get borders and stuff. And then, yeah, just gonna show you how borders look like. Personally, I'm not a big fan of borders, but some people are. So just know that you can look into these options here. But I'm gonna keep everything like as is right now. Now, one thing I do want to see is instead of Serpent Sting, because I don't want to see Serpent Sting. Like, I know I'm using Serpent Sting. So I want to see actually the name of the target that gets hit with this Serpent Sting. Because in a raid setting, sure, we have here the dummies, and the dummies have between raider training dummies or just training dummies here. But in a raid setting, there's multiple names for multiple adds, bosses, and such. And I actually want to track that. So let's go into display on the Weakaura itself, not on the group, on the Weakaura. And instead of the %n, we're going to use one of these additional triggers that we used. And for this case, we're going to use %1.unit in minor, non-capitalized letters, and then a capital N to write name. So we get the unit name, and you can get like spell ID, debuff classes, and all that stuff that's shown on this list. But I actually want to see the name of the person or the add, boss, whatever that gets hit by my Serpent Sting. And once I press enter, you're gonna see this disappear. This is because it's kind of like a custom function inside the display, so it's not going to show here because it's dynamic, and it's going to show, so it can't put a pre-display here because it doesn't know what it needs to be. I'm going to put a little bit bigger, like a 15, so we get to see it a little bit better, but that's it. Let's test this Weakaura now, actually. So I put Serpent Sting, I get the name, and another Serpent Sting, and another, and then another, and it just keeps multiplying as much as I put Serpent Stings on the targets. And that's how you make a multi-target with a dynamic group to track all of your debuffs. And yeah, that's multi-target for you. So let's get on to the next one. Alright, so I realized one thing we haven't looked at a lot into is these texts. Right, I'm just gonna show unload on this one, just make it never, so we never see it. But I realized we never done a text, and I'm actually gonna make a text. And by the way, when I make this text, it immediately put inside the group because I was hovering the group. So let's just make it like stat printer. We're gonna do stat printer. Actually rename that and put actually the correct name, but it's in the group and I don't want it to be in the group. So I'm actually going to click this arrow, and now it's outside of the group, and the group is on never loaded. But should I want, let's say I make a group, and should I want this to go on the group, I can either click and drag and take it inside, or I can actually click this little thing here and then click the group. If I open the group, I can then click on the Weakaura and this arrow, and then now it's out. And should there be more Weakauras like this, so I'm just gonna duplicate like 2 times right there. And should they all be inside this thing here? I don't like this organization, so I can actually put this Weakaura to the top and put this one right there, and I can organize as I want. Anyway, onto the stat printer. So we actually gonna do something here that's gonna show us, let's say, our agility. We want to see our agility, so we're going to trigger, and what we're gonna use here is a player unit info, and we want to see our stat, so character stats, and we want to see our agility. So I need to tell this Weakaura when or what circumstance is gonna trigger this Weakaura, and it's just basically because I always want to see it. You could also have like your agility is a certain number, and if it goes above a certain number, it then triggers, because that should show you got some boost of agility. You could get kind of complex with it, but I just want to see my agility and that's it. So let's make it my agility is bigger than 0, aka this is always going to be positive, or this is always going to be active. And yeah, that's the trigger, that's done. Now you see that nothing appears, and that's because we need to go on the display and we need to change these from progress to something. In that scenario, if you look at those additional triggers, you see that if I write %1.agility, it then shows our agility. Right there. Now I do not like how small this is, so I'm gonna actually make it a little bit bigger, like that. And because it's agility and I'm a hunter, I would like it green for some reason. So let's say I just want it kind of like that. And one thing here, let's say you want the class color of hunter. So if you go on your browser and you actually type wow class colors. Sorry, I need to put it here. So if we go to class colors and open our class colors, and we see the hunter is actually this X code, Hexadecimal, I believe that's the name. So let's copy that and let's introduce that into the Weakauras here. And you can see now I got the hunter color and it shows on my thing here. Now I kind of want this to be above my name, so I'm just gonna drag it here, right there probably, and now I see my agility. And this is very dynamic. Should I get more agility, you can see the number changes, so it updates on my agility. And that's because I got more agility from these trinkets. And the next Weakauras that we're gonna work on, speaking of trinkets, is gonna be tracking the global cooldowns of our trinkets. So let's get into that. Alright, so now we're gonna get on something very fun and very, well, I wouldn't say hard, but it's a bit more complex than what we used to. And it's actually gonna be the main chunk of this video. But I'm gonna try to take one step at a time, not go too fast, but also not go too slow. So we're gonna make a tracking of our trinkets, or when they are active and their internal cooldown. We want to see those two informations. Now the first thing we need to do, because there's two of them, it's a group. So I'm actually going to use a normal group, and this is just going to be trinket tracker, something like that. And the reason I'm using now on a group instead of a dynamic group is because, let's say I want to have one trinket show here on the left side and another trinket here on the right side. So not growing anywhere, I just want to have them in that specific spots. So I'm actually going to use a group instead of a dynamic group just because of that. Now let's make a new aura that's an icon, and put this inside the group immediately. And it's going to be trinket 1. And now let's duplicate this Weakauras, and that's going to be trinket 2. So the first thing we need to do here, and you can ignore this just because we don't have anything here, is understand what our cooldowns of these trinkets are, whether they're active or not. And I'm using these two trinkets because they're not active. The actives are a bit easier to deal with, and these ones are passive trinkets. So these are a bit harder to do Weakauras for those ones. So that's why I'm using these two trinkets. And they also have two different internal cooldowns, so that's why I'm also going to use these two as an example. So the first thing we need to know is how long do they stay active and how long is their internal cooldown. Now, one good thing about Mists of Pandaria is that it says on your trinket. This one, for example, stays for 20 seconds, and then it has an internal cooldown of 115 seconds. Whereas this one, it says approximately, so it stays 10 seconds and approximately procs 0.92 times per minute. So that's like roughly 1 time per minute. But this just means, and I've done some research on this trinket, there's no internal cooldown on this trinket. Well, there is one that's 10 seconds, but it stays up for 10 seconds. So it's like there isn't, because internal cooldown starts exactly when the trinket procs. So another thing, if you don't know what's the internal cooldown of a trinket, then you need to look it up, because there's no way you can know, because not all trinkets have the same internal cooldown. So what you can do here is go onto our Wowhead. And if you go into Wowhead, you can type your trinket. So let's say you want to see dev choice. So dev choice is actually a trinket that stays up for 15 seconds, and the internal cooldown is 45 seconds. So 45 minus 15, that's 30 seconds that it's not going to be able to proc again after your proc has ended. So now let's say you're actually going to look at another trinket that's super known. It's Death from Watlk, Wrath of the Lich King, is Deathbringer's Wheel. This is super known trinket. It's very OP and everyone likes it. But this, I'm using this example because it comes in a different amount. It shows a different number that we haven't seen yet, and it's 175 minutes cooldown. And what does this mean? This just means it's a minute, and then 75% of a minute, that's 45 seconds. So this is 1 minute and 45 seconds internal cooldown. It lasts 30 seconds, so that's going to be a minute and 15 seconds where you can't use it or you can't proc it again. So our trinket here is called Assurance of Consequence. Assurance of Consequence. And that's gonna be, just like it said, 115 seconds of cooldown. So, I mean, there's this number here, but that can throw you off a little bit. But if there's seconds, just really go for that. All right. So now that this is figured out, and we have those values, let's actually make this freaking Weakauras. So Trinket 2 is this one. This is really simple. It's just going to be an aura. And this aura, it's called Vicious. I've looked into that. If you haven't looked into that and you don't know, you can just research more about it online, or you can just attack the dummy and see what buffs appear. So it's going to be a buff name. It's going to be Vicious, and you could put show only, but as far as I know, there's no other thing that they can give you, so it's not really needed to put show on. And the display is just going to be basically a P, and let's make it like a 25. Let's put it on the center, and let's format this to not show precision, and done. So the next trinket, it's actually going to be very similar, and because I've done the display of this one, I can actually go here and add the icon and make it like a Vicious, which is, if I'm not mistaken, this icon. So now that I've done this one, and I'm just going to delete this one because I actually like the fact that I already did some of that setup on display, and all I got to change is the image to Dexterous. That's going to be the proc name of this thing. And let's show cooldown on both, so it has the overlay. And the positions are all done, so I don't need to set up anything more here. But now I need to go on trigger, and this one is going to be a bit different, because this one has 10 seconds that's up, and then it can be any time, and I can't really track an internal cooldown. So I'm just going to track when it's up. But what I need to track for the other one is its internal cooldown as well. So let's say I want this one to show here, and this one I want to show here, for example, or there. So that's why we're using a group, because I want them to show in different spots. So this first one, you need to, just like any trinket, you need to see when it's up, and we're gonna put Dexterous, that's the name, and it's, yeah, no need for show only, and that's done. Okay, now we see this thing, but now let's take a step further, and we want to see the internal cooldown. And the internal cooldown, we're gonna do that by going into combat log. And before I actually do this, let's think about this for a second. Let's actually take a second and try to think, how are we gonna track this internal cooldown? How exactly are we gonna tell this Weakauras add-on that we no longer have this active and we wanna track the internal cooldown? So you can do it multiple ways, but the one that comes to mind is whenever this buff, Dexterous, goes off, then I start seeing the internal cooldown. So the way we do that is by going to combat log, and we're gonna check a spell, and we're actually gonna check an aura removed. So again, there's all these options, but aura removed just means you lost this aura, and the aura was the buff, right? So you just lost the buff, and the buff, it's on me, the player. Oops, almost put target for some reason. And then the buff is also called Dexterous. We could get the ID, but I don't think it's needed. And it is a buff, so but again, it's gonna check either way. So let's put it above just in case there's no Dexterous, that's a debuff and procs this accidentally. But now we need to show how long is this internal cooldown, how long is gonna last. And I know we've seen it was 115, but let's think about it this for a second. It's 115 when the Weakauras procs, when the Trinket procs. So now the Trinket procs, it lasts 20 seconds, and then it continues on the internal cooldown. So we need to take those 20 seconds out of this 115, leaving this on 95 seconds. I always put these on seconds, by the way. Don't try to put like something like 1 minute, 10 seconds, for example. This is just not gonna work. So put it always on 95, on seconds. Okay, and now we're actually gonna see the Trinket when it goes up, and then when the internal cooldown. So let's actually test that. And right here you see I made a mistake. And this is good. This is part of making Weakauras. You get to do mistakes, but let's actually fix, and I already know what the mistake was, but let's fix this mistake. The mistake is that we made 2 triggers and we made all triggers. We need to make it on any triggers. Because think about this for a second. If I make it all triggers, I need to have the debuff and I need to not have the debuff at the same time. So obviously this is never gonna happen, right? So we need to make any triggers. Let me just get the internal cooldowns resetted here with the ptr cooldown command, and let's test it again. And you can see it's up. We saw the other one already activate. It's not activating now, but yeah, we've seen that it works. There we go, now we see it. But now let's see what happens here when this runs out. So when this runs out, we get into the internal cooldown, right? But I don't like how this is still colorful. Let's say I want to desaturate this. And now we're gonna get into something really fancy. And this is the next part of this video, and a very powerful tool of Weakauras, which is conditions. So conditions is something that I just really love about Weakauras, and they just allow you to do certain things considering certain other things. So let's make it very simple, the first condition. The first condition is if trigger, let's say if trigger 2 is active, and remember trigger 2 is the internal cooldown, right? So if trigger 2 is active, that means the trigger 1 is not, by the way. So let's make it as true, active true. Then we are gonna desaturate the Weakauras, right? And should you have the Weakauras already desaturated for some reason, you can make it that another condition here. Let's just duplicate, but instead of trigger 2, we're gonna use trigger 1. If trigger 1 is true, then the desaturate is off. Okay, so let's see what it looks now. I'll fast forward this. Alright, we're about to get out of this debuff and let's see. And it's desaturated, and now I know I'm in internal cooldown. So that's how conditions are powerful. But not only that, we can do a lot more with conditions. Like a lot more. So let's actually get into these conditions and see what else can we do with these with conditions. Let's just organize this here, make another condition, and let's make that if trigger 1, aka that's gonna be our trinket. If it's on, let's say, what are we gonna do? Let's say we wanna make it the remaining duration of trigger 1. So that's how long we still have the proc of the trinket for. Let's say it's equal to 5. We can make it that now it's gonna glow, right? It's the last 5 seconds of the trinket. We are gonna make it low. Or actually, instead of actually making 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and to 0, we can actually make it it's equal to 5 or lower than 5. So we only have to make a condition. Another thing you can do here is send messages. So let's say you add another condition, right? Similar to this one, if trigger 1 remaining time it's 5. Now for this one we're actually going to make 5. Then we're gonna send a chat message. We can desaturate colors, heights, we can change the shape of the Weakauras, we can make sounds, we can zoom, we can do all sorts of stuff. But let's send a message. And the message is gonna be on raid warning. That's why I'm in the raid, by the way. I just wanna say the reason why I'm not putting a yellow or a say chat, it's because Weakauras is limited to the point that if you're not in a raid or a dungeon or whatever, if you're just in an open world, you can't make Weakauras that use say or yell. Same for actions, same conditions. You can't use this because it's just like an anti-spam safe guarantee, whatever. But inside raids, you can totally use say and yell. But because we're outside on the open world, let's actually use raid warning, and it's gonna say 5, right? So let's just duplicate this, and on 4 seconds, it's gonna say 4. And done, right? So now we're gonna have a countdown on this timer. I do know one thing though, is that raid warnings are a bit delayed to when things happen, right? If I send a raid warning, you see it takes almost like a second to pop up. So I'm using raid warnings to show you, because raid warnings is not the same as the other ones, okay? So let's see this Weakauras here now pop up. So we're about to get to 5, it's gonna glow very soon. It starts close and 3, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it's gone into internal cooldown. Beautiful, so it works perfectly as we want it. And it is just to show you how powerful conditions can be. We made a bunch of conditions here, but you get the idea. You can get Weakauras and manipulate it into to do different things throughout that Weakauras. So I hope this helps explain what conditions are, and I hope you understand how we're doing internal cooldowns for trinkets and all the other stuff we've done so far. Because I was planning on actually making our very first Weakauras for raid settings, so we're actually gonna go inside a raid and then figure out some mechanic and do that Weakauras, but I can see these videos getting kinda long, so we're gonna save that for the advanced guide. And in the advanced guide, we're also gonna start using custom code with Lua functions and all that good stuff, and actually making some more complex and super fun stuff. And this is when making Weakauras gets really rewarding and really fun, and sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, it also gets very frustrating, but when you finally get it working, the frustrations are over and it feels awesome to have that Weakauras working. So yeah, I really hope this helped everyone, and I hope that everyone enjoyed this video. And yeah, make sure that you're gonna stay tuned for the next one with the advanced stuff. And I'm just gonna sign off now, so take care, peace.